good morning, good evening. I know we have friends from New Zealand watching us, so good whatever world. Welcome here, Jennifer Cleversey Moffitt. Thank you so much to be the guest of episode 101 of the Social Media Love podcast. And as I always say, I bring la crème de la crème, which is women who are visible in a way that will lit your fire. That's what I say. Because, Jennifer, you're going to introduce yourself. But I want to say right away that today you're here. You're a very busy woman leader. And I appreciate so much that you took the time to share your voice. Because the first time I heard you, I was like, oh my God, I need to bring Jennifer to talk to our community here at Social Media Love. So if you don't know me yet, I'm Angelique Binet. I'm the founder of Social Media Love, and I guide women, entrepreneurs mostly, through the journey of developing their visibility online, but also in the way you show up in a room, in the way you show up on a stage, in the way you set up your prices, all the things that kind of triggers and activates some insecurities. So we know that the 6 core fears for women entrepreneurs, and there are studies, and women in general. And last night I was at a networking event and a man raised and said, listen, Angelique, men feel that too. So that was so interesting. But I said, I take care of women because I know kind of more about women because I am a woman. I'm walking the walk, talking the talk. So imposter syndrome is one of the words I hear the most. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, being not enough. I don't have enough diploma. I don't have enough whatever. Fear of being inadequate in a room. I don't belong. Scaling and delegating. Fear of losing control is a big thing too. Money, pricing, fear of asking for more. And then funding and partnership in business, fear of asking for support when you don't, and pretending that you have all the answers, right? So we don't have all the answers. That's why I bring you guests that are extraordinary. And Jennifer, again, thank you so much. So what about you introduce yourself so that, you could answer this question. Tell me kind of the story that your business card doesn't tell. And what made you the woman that you are today and still becoming, because after talking a few times with you, you are like expanding and expanding. At every day is a new day.
Thanks, Angelique, and it's nice to be here. So I'm Jennifer Cleversey Moffitt. I am the Chief Administrative Officer and General Counsel at the Belledune Port Authority. So for those of you who don't know where Belledune is, it's in northern New Brunswick, a province in Canada. And we are one of 17 port authorities across Canada. So there's lots of ports in Canada, but there's only 17 that are federally regulated and part really of the federal network, the federal transportation system that delivers goods and services both nationally and internationally. So my journey, I guess, what my business card doesn't tell you is that I grew up in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, so the next province over from New Brunswick. I am a mom of 2 very brilliant women, young women, and I think sometimes that's what, propels me to do some of the work that I do and talk about some of the issues that I talk about very openly, is to know that my girls are going to be growing up in maybe, a business environment that's different than mine. And it's because of women like me and Angelique and lots of other brilliant women out there that have paved the way and opened doors and created pathways for smart women to be part of boardrooms and entrepreneurs and driving success in a lot of what were considered traditionally male-dominated industries. I love ballet. In my spare time, I am a ballet teacher at a local dance school. And Angelique likes to point out that every once in a while I show up with my bun, my hair pulled back. And I joke with Angelique and some of my female colleagues that this is definitely something that I feel gives me power and polish when I'm negotiating or in a boardroom or, embarking upon maybe a difficult conversation. So we often talk about those little things that empower us, that make us feel a little bit more authentic and a little bit more ourselves, so that we can bring the best version of that to our work. So I guess, that's probably a little bit of a synopsis of what's not on the business card, but what makes me me. So yeah.
I love it. And also I would say you will realize after watching this video that Jennifer is very generous, sharing how she just started to tell you how she brings that visibility in her and to feel anchored in that who she is. So we have always three pillars when we do those interviews. So the first one is, of course, about visibility. So I'm always inviting you to, I'll follow you. I follow, it's not a strict interview at all. And I would invite you to give examples of as much as you can, so that I believe that, when a woman makes a decision about her visibility, having some anchor action that shows her that she can do it helps so much. So that's why I'm inviting you to do so, if you are open to it, of course. So let's start with the first question I have here on my screen. Before you felt that anchored in who you are and being truly visible and authentically visible, when you were kind of in the hiding season, and I believe that we always hide, but the more aware we are, the more sneaky it gets, the way we hide. So what was that like for you, before that awareness about no, this is me, I got to go full in?
I think it comes with age. I'm not going to lie. I think there's a wisdom that you sort of develop over a period of time. And I'm not going to lie. I think some of that comes from experiences that are uncomfortable, or experiences that put you back on your heels, or experiences that make you think, oh, I should have been the one to speak up in the room, or I should have been. I was the one that did the homework. I know I did the homework, but I didn't have the confidence in my own voice to really say, what you thought, or if you were disagreeing with someone who was, in power. So I think over a period of time, you develop the courage to do that. And frankly, I am just such a huge believer in doing your homework. And sometimes, I think, as women, we tend to sort of think that we haven't done enough, right? That we're not enough, or that our voice doesn't resonate the same way in a boardroom. And I think homework to me was something that really grounded me. It gave me the confidence to be able to walk into rooms and say, this is why I'm disagreeing, or these are the points that I need to make. The flip side of that is to be very cognizant about when you don't have the answer, and it's okay. And to say to people, that's not something that I can answer at this juncture, but I will get back to you. And for me, there's a level of competence that comes in that message. You're not telling, someone fluff. You're not delivering something that's not grounded in truth. And you are committing to them to get back to them. So I think it was just really that period of understanding when I didn't show up properly, but knowing in my heart I had done everything that I could, and to rely on the homework that I had done, and saying, okay, it's okay to use my voice in these settings, because I could very possibly be the most educated person in the room on this topic. And you don't have to yell. You don't have to be forceful, but you can have that quiet confidence and competence in the subject matter to deliver the message. So, in my 20s, I think it was very different, my level of confidence than it is now in my 40s, right? So I think a lot of it is cumulative experience and getting to that point where you start to feel comfortable in your own skin. But it's the experience coupled with being humble, I think, that really allows people to start to trust in the messaging that's coming out of your mouth, right?
I love this. Trust whatever comes out of your mouth. Yeah. And the word courage that you said. And being like, okay with not having the answer. And you reminded me when you said that, I was a TV reporter for more than 10 years. So I interviewed a lot of politicians, economic leaders like you. And you could see from behind the camera who was, especially when you talk to journalists, you don't have always the answers. And so you could see the difference between the ones who are trying to make the answers, and that's even you feel it, right? Humans feel this, versus the one that is anchored and say, well, guess what? I don't know this. I'll get back to you, right? So you also bring the kind of evidence that you got to be in the arena to get to this level of ease in being in a comfortable situation. So like Brené Brown says, you got to be in the arena. And if you're not in the arena, don't give me any advice. Got on the floor. So Jennifer, you are in the arena. So, you mentioned boardrooms. So tell me how this example that you just shared, kind of the evolution of your presence in the boardroom since the beginning of your career to now, and how do you use that anchorness in the way you behave and run negotiation and lead conversations?
Sure. And I think we all have to be aware that there's still unconscious bias. There's still pieces in the boardroom that are genderized. And I think, once you start to see that and you can adjust, in situations, your presence becomes a little bit more firm in those settings. So I'll give you an example. I often use this example. I was in a boardroom one time where I was the only woman in the boardroom, and someone knocked over their coffee, and everyone automatically turned to me to see if I would just clean it up. And I think that's and it's not that these men were overtly, doing anything, negative, but I think there was that expectation that, and I thought about the context of it. I was the most educated person in the room. And, I'm the lawyer, and I'm there to guide people through fairly complicated matters, but yet everybody's inclination was to look to me to clean up the spilled coffee. And so in my 20s, I would have gotten up and gotten napkins and cleaned the coffee. In my 40s, I don't move. I didn't spill the coffee. And just because I'm the only woman in the room doesn't mean it's automatically my job to clean it up. And those pieces can often feel uncomfortable. They can feel uncomfortable for the people in the room and for yourself. I had to consciously stop myself. And it's not because I didn't care and not because I didn't want to help, but I knew that the minute that I did that and I confirmed the expectation that the woman in the room would clean up the coffee, my stature and the level of respect for me in the room would go down. And so I sat there, and we all sat in uncomfortableness until someone else got up and got the napkins. And so these are little things that in a boardroom change the feeling. It changes the atmosphere. And if we as women can fight against, not only when it's overt, but also when there's that unconscious bias that we've been conditioned as a society to look at what women's roles are and what men's roles are. When we challenge that, we create space, and it's a good thing because it creates a more level playing field when it comes to having those tough conversations. I'm not subservient. I'm equal at the table, but the problem is I have to fight for that position. It's not automatically given, right? So, and I'm going to say it's changing. Like, 20 years ago, very different than what it is now. And I joke, with my girls, like the work that, women did 20 years ago, 30 years ago to open doors for me, that's appreciated, but that doesn't mean it stops with me. I have to continue that work so that my daughters, when they're at the boardroom table, it looks even better. And there's a level of respect that they don't have to fight for. It's there because they're educated, they show up, they're polished, they have the ability to communicate. It's not fighting for that chance to have their voice heard. Their voice is automatically part of the discourse.
I love this. And I want to kind of bring something to the conversation, and you tell me based on what you just said, how it relates to what you went through and what you notice in that sense. So I always say, visibility is not a strategic challenge for women. It's really more a safety in terms of, how suddenly, like the way you describe it, you feel unsafe, right? You feel that you have to negotiate your space, your behavior, your words. So I don't know if you could bring us inside of you. Like, how do you, what's happening in your body at this moment? Because like in my world, we run with the body. The body knows before the mind. Mm-hmm. So how does it feel? And how do you regulate to a point that you can take the action that serves you, that is the statement, that is the new behavior you want to bring now in the boardroom or wherever?
So it's a great question. And I think we have to be cognizant sometimes that when there's an uncomfortable feeling, it's not necessarily negative. So we often correlate uncomfortableness with negativity. And sometimes for change, uncomfortable is what we have to sit with, right? And that's not necessarily negative. So, you may get that feeling in the pit of your stomach that, everybody's looking at me, and why didn't I just pick up the napkin and wipe up the coffee? But there's a stronger message that's being conveyed. And if the uncomfortable feeling that you're feeling, you can separate it from negativity, you use it. It's a powerful emotion. It's a powerful push. Again, I go back to, some of the things that I say to my kids, like, we talk about butterflies in your stomach, and we talk about, okay, you're nervous or you're anxious about something. And ever since they were little, I've always said, well, the butterflies are there because they're there to help you. They're excited. Like, they want to get out there and they want to do something. And if you use all of the power that those butterflies have, you're going to do great things. So don't think of the butterflies as being something you have to squash or something that's negative. Use it. It's propelling you forward. It's a little bit of extra excitement that makes your energy level go up. And I think as women, we have to start to think about those things, that negativity and maybe what the body is feeling are mutually exclusive, and to separate them, because change is never easy, and you have to sit with those feelings and be okay with them to make change happen.
I love this. So Jennifer, in the work I do with female entrepreneurs, we learn how to feel our feelings, and especially in the discomfort, right? Rather than shoving them under the carpet and then you burn out or you have a heart attack 20 years later.
None of those are good things. No.
Yes. So I would love for you to share, because maybe you don't call them like this, but the first time I heard you have very somatic ways to help your body and your energy to be aligned to your vision of you as the leader you are. And I'm not going to say what it is, because I want you to be open to say the one you want, but it was so cool. Like, this is when you got my heart. Like, we have so many women think that you have to be serious in business, and the higher in the hierarchy you have to be even more serious. But your approach to your way of being fully expressed in life, at work, in your family. So what do you do to help you get to the energy and frequency level that you know this is where you shine and you get to the point?
So there's a few things, and I think it really is individual. People have to figure out what gets them, in a space to take on a challenge or to face something that's a little bit difficult. So there's a few things I do. I love my high heels. Big fan of high heels. So you can't tell on the podcast right now, but I'm about 5'8.5", 5'9". So when I wear 3-inch high heels, it's a lovely height boost for me. I do love to wear a good black suit. I find that very empowering. Tying back my hair, so that there's a polish and a sort of sleekness to my appearance. But what I do in the background sometimes, I have playlists that I definitely use to make sure that I'm kind of in the right mindset when I walk into certain settings. And Angelique, it's probably part of the talk that I gave about being your own hype woman. Sometimes you have to create the hype. You have to create the energy. And how do you do that? You've got to find what works for you, what gives you that confidence to walk into a room. So my playlist is a lot of some stuff maybe that isn't for this podcast, but it gets you motivated. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but when I'm going into a really tough negotiation, I often play Rihanna's "Bitch Better Have My Money" because that's my gets me ready to definitely take on whatever I need to take on in the boardroom. The other thing that I have noticed from sort of a communication perspective is also I tend to attempt to lower my voice when I'm in the boardroom. And I do find, and I think it was one of the other women that was on the last webinar that we did that mentioned Margaret Thatcher used to do the same thing. So I was very flattered that Margaret Thatcher and I have the same technique. But oftentimes lowering your voice to a bit of a frequency that's a little bit less sort of high pitch, less sort of has that tone of, especially when you're delivering messaging that's disagreeing. I find that seems to allow people to stop talking over you, and they take a moment to listen to what you have to say. So oftentimes it's not being loud, it's not demanding attention, but it's really being that competent, confident, calm voice in the room that tends to create a level of respect.
Mm. You're so generous. And I know that you are a good mentor and an ambassador for mentoring. So I hope you're watching this and taking notes because those are so good. And they're very easy to implement. You have to think about it, right? But and play with it and see how it lands and then that becomes you.
And look, if you get dressed in the morning and you put a black suit on and it's not you, don't do it. You've got to figure out what gives you your power and what gives you that sense of, I've got this. This is where I'm supposed to be. And I know today, if I'm going into a tough conversation, that I'm at my best right now because I feel in my skin as comfortable as I possibly can be.
Love it. Love it. Okay. So I would love to talk to you more now about the importance, the infusion of AI in the world of women entrepreneurs, women leaders. So how are you actually using AI yourself in the business or in your life or actually in the way that you lead as a leader? Is there anything you want to share with us?
AI is it's a double-edged sword from my perspective. I think it's a very useful tool. But definitely in my profession, being a lawyer, it poses some problems with respect to confidentiality. We all know how AI learns, and we have to be very cognizant about the usage of artificial intelligence. Watching right now Taylor Swift and her filings of trademarks. I think it's brilliant. Do the rest of us mere mortals have the ability to do that? Probably not. But I think she's setting a really important precedence as to how you protect your image, how you protect you as a brand. And I find it fascinating. I think it's going to be incredibly interesting to watch the progression. What I would say is, we all, I hope we all, most of us do, have a moral compass, right? And I talk about that often sort of in my work, that your moral compass guides your decision making. And when it comes to something like AI, if your moral compass, if it feels like that compass is being pushed off true north, listen to your gut. Listen to what your heart and your head are telling you. And regulators are going to be coming out, and they're going to be creating guardrails and understanding how usage can be regulated, but it's developing faster than we can regulate, faster than we even know how to regulate. So, in your business, remember that your brain got you to where you're going. It wasn't created through some other artificial, entity. And we have to go back and think about, some of the best ideas in history are a result of critical thinking, or a challenge, or a crisis even. And AI is AI because of us. So we have to really get back to understanding what's the difference between a tool and the actual sort of critical thinking and that intellectual horsepower, right? That comes from the analyzing of a problem, or analyzing of a crisis, and figuring it out. So, do I have the answers to this? Absolutely not. It's emerging. It's incredibly fascinating to watch, but I think there's going to be a lot of discussions about the morality of it, the ethics of it, and what those guardrails eventually will look like as it continues to grow.
I love your perspective as a lawyer. Like, you're very, you know what to look for. And so for you, how do you use it to, some people use it for building the business and the back end of the business, and it's very powerful. Some use it to create brainstorming, or some use it to deep research, which is the part I love the most. I'm personally getting very fatigued to read posts or articles, and I recognize the structure of the AI tools. And so I think that there is a point from that perspective that people are going to get tired of recognizing that it's, AI production after AI production from a content, from your voice perspective. I'm not saying about, the building of infrastructure. I think this is going to be like, we can't even imagine what's going to come out of that. But from the using your voice and being visible, I don't know. I would love to hear from you, because you have such a beautiful helicopter view of how women are walking in this world. How do you feel that? When do I know that enough is enough, that I need to go back to who I am? And maybe I can do a grammar check with my AI, but
Right.
what do I want to say? I wonder what's your perspective on that, the footprint of your voice.
Look, the stuff that has been the most rewarding in my life has been the stuff that I've muscled through, the stuff that I've intellectually had to dig in on, or emotionally had to dig in on. AI to me is easy, right? It doesn't have the same feeling. And yeah, you can use it for research, but but I think there's a double checking that's required. AI doesn't have a rigor that's built into it that the human brain craves. We crave, especially, your audience as entrepreneurs. These are people that crave that rigor. They crave, ingenuity. They crave problem solving. And like, I think when you and I were speaking earlier, offline, just about things like closing deals. Okay. It's scary and it's thrilling all at the same time, right? With AI figuring out the answer to a problem, when you're fully engaged and you come up with that answer and it works, that is a thrilling, it's something that's incredibly rewarding. So I understand kind of where you're coming from, that there's fatigue. I can see that happening. What's interesting too is I see in the school system, I have one of my daughters, when she was doing a language arts project, they asked her to write it in pen or pencil. So we're getting back to this phase where teachers are recognizing that critical thinking is not happening. And so I applaud those teachers when they said, look, we're going to go back and make you handwrite this out, because at least there's a little bit of rigor. You may be checking AI online, but you physically now have to, it's not a cut and paste. It's not the easiest solution. So is it perfect? No, but is it a step towards telling these kids that using your own brain is a good thing? Like, we all need to be a little bit more engaged. And it's funny, my 17-year-old, on one of her projects, we were talking about conversion to green energy and clean energy. And, it was a bit of a position paper. And over supper, we had this conversation and, talked through some of, the work that I do and some of, the emerging technologies. And at the end of the conversation, she turned to me and she said, "You're way better than AI, Mom." And I was like, that's amazing. Like, it was a fantastic compliment, right? But I think when it becomes too simple, you remove the rigor, you remove the intellectual horsepower required, but you also remove that rewarding feeling of solving the problem or coming up with something super creative. So I think there's a part of the human spirit that is going to continue to crave that's going to pull away from AI for everything.
I love it. Connect with the intelligence horsepower you are. Don't forget that you're very intelligent too. And I love what you say, AI is here because of our intelligence. It's a gathering of everything, right? So love it, love it, love it. Okay, let's talk about money. And
sure.
Then I'll let you go.
Sure.
So I was, I want to hear from you on this. So it's not a new number. I don't even know the number, but I know the trend. I was in a room with 55 women entrepreneurs from the US and Canada last weekend. And everybody was kind of mentioning the fact that when you are doing venture capital for your business, you're raising money for business, when you're female entrepreneurs, you are asked about the risk assessment. And then when you are a man, you are asked to the futuristic vision of your project. And so I'm like, oh my God, I want to talk about this with Jennifer, because I'm sure you have something to say. Maybe you've experienced it, you see it, you hear about it. I just want to have your point of view on this, because this podcast is not to just hear what I think, it's really to hear about what you think as the leader you are.
So I think as women, again, this goes back to whether it's imposter syndrome or a lack of confidence in the homework we've done or the background that we bring into these negotiations. But, and especially if you're an entrepreneur, there is a need to be a closer. You have to start becoming comfortable with that. And the rules, you can't change what's being asked of you, but you can change how you respond, and you can change the confidence level in which you deliver that response. Do we have to change the institutional view? 100%. Every time that we talk about imposter syndrome, there's always this focus on the individual. It doesn't come from the individual. Institutions have created a system where we were explicitly told we were not invited. We're not meant to fit in. But that doesn't mean you stop pushing. So it's to develop that confidence, understand that it may not be an equal playing field. And, eventually, hopefully it will be. But when it's not, you don't back away. You don't stop showing up, and you don't stop asking for what you deserve. And keep in the back of your mind, closing is exciting, it's thrilling, it's terrifying. But these are the things that, we're built to do. We're resilient. Women are resilient. We have kids, we manage families, we open businesses. We're multitaskers by nature. So it's to recognize when it's not fair, but to not stop, to continue to push through that. And if you sit there and you wallow in the self-pity that this shouldn't be happening to you, it won't happen to you. So, clock the unfairness and keep on working. Like that's I think the number one thing we as women can do. And when it comes for money, look for a good deal. And good deals, Angelique, you and I, back and forth on this, it means longevity. It means partnership. It means coming to the table with people that hold values you hold. And that is incredibly important. Is it going to happen all the time? Absolutely not. You're going to have, companies, clients, whatever, that are not the easiest to deal with, but you have to create longevity. That's what propels businesses forward. That's what keeps entrepreneurs in business. And you've got to always keep in the back of your mind that closing isn't the thing that should be terrifying or stopping you, even if it is. So again, it goes back to that feeling of, okay, this is a little uncomfortable, or I have butterflies, but it's not necessarily negative, and channel that into confidence.
So when you say longevity, what would be, your main kind of advice or first action to take towards this as a business owner?
Talk about longevity with your partners. Talk about that as being an important thing to you. One of the contracts we just finalized at the port, this was a relationship we had had for 25 years and sat down and negotiated a new deal for an additional 25 years. And one of the things that was very clear at the outset was, this is not a 5-year agreement. We are in this together. This is for 25 more years and maybe even longer. But with that in mind, let's get to the table and figure out what the numbers look like for everyone. But this is not a short-term deal. This is something that we have to foster and we have to develop together. And so to make that intention known is incredibly important, and I think really powerful, right, in negotiating.
Yeah, I love that you share it that way, because it builds ultimate trust as well. If you care for that long, whether it's, I always say to my clients, I don't have a port, right?
Yes.
I always say, like, let's work at least 3 years together. We put in place year 1, we oil the machine year 2, and then we scale or remove what doesn't belong. It takes time to build an oil machine.
And longevity is contextual, right? Like your longevity might be 3 years and mine's 25. It really depends on the business, the model, but to know that you're locking in, right? And it's not, and to me, it's a litmus test. If somebody backs away from that concept, then maybe you don't align, right? And so it's it can be a quick litmus test for sure.
Beautiful. So I love that you answered all my question, like as part of the first question. I just want to kind of give you a final question, because we are at the end of the conversation and I want to give you the stage even more. So if every woman entrepreneur listening right now was in the room with you, with us here, what would you want her to know, feel, or do differently after hearing your voice today? That was so generous, Jennifer.
Well, I'm not an entrepreneur. So the first thing I would say is I applaud you, because that takes an awful lot of courage. And especially being a female in that space, for some of the things, Angelique, that you had raised about, banking, the questions may look different, or, access to investment. maybe slower, those sorts of things. So I would applaud those women in the room for taking that step, because I think it's incredibly courageous. But the other thing that I would say, I guess, maybe from my perspective, is to really trust in yourself and do your homework. Do your homework. Be the most educated person in the room on whatever that is, and as meaningful to you and your business. And be humble, but be confident. There's a way to walk that line, and I think women do it beautifully in the boardroom. And recognize when ego is in the room with you, and you have to diffuse it. So your confidence and your ability to be the expert on something is really what gives you the power to continue. So I would just say, even when the butterflies flutter in your stomach and you feel a little uncomfortable, just know that those are things that are propelling change, and there's nothing wrong with that.
So powerful, so powerful. So if anything that we discussed, resonates with you, I want you to, I encourage you, I don't want you, you do you, but to book a visibility call with me, where we can actually, go through where you're at, how do you live through your visibility, where do you see that it stops you in growing, and how we can build a bridge together. So I put the link around the video or on the podcast show notes, because it will be a podcast as well, Jennifer, so So later I'll tell you when the podcast is out. Perfect. Because I know some people listen to podcasts when they do their fitness and stuff like that. So we have multiple versions of everything we said, so that more women hear what you had to say. Was so beautiful. Thank you so much, Jennifer. You can stay backstage with me for a second. Perfect. And I'm gonna close this.
Thank you.